so.
I believe we do have a quorum.
Okay. Keith is, Councilman Waring is not here yet, right?
No, sir.
Okay, well, I think he'll catch up with us. I'll let him catch up. All right, I'm going to call the Community Development Committee meeting to order. It's now approximately 4:31. And the first, I don't have my agenda in front of me. The first item on the agenda is invocation. I'm gonna ask Councilwoman Jackson to please give us a short invocation, please.
Thank you. Lord, we ask your presence here today with all of these fine people. I look forward to the work that is being done in the service of our community. Thank you for all of the hands and the feet to go where we are not able to go, especially in these days of the virus, and the expectations that people have and legitimately to be cared for and served in ways that we would appreciate your assistance to allow us to do that. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. So we're gonna move right along. We have quite a few things on the agenda, and we're gonna try to keep it moving as possible, but giving everyone the opportunity to ask questions if they have it. So the first thing we have is the rental assistance demonstration, which is the RAD program that would be by Mr. Don Cameron, who's the Executive Director of the City Housing Authority. Then second, we have the Friends of the Low-Lying Community Outreach Education, and that will be by Mr. Thomas Bradford and Megan Mills. And thirdly, we have the Laurel Island Development by Robert Clemens and his staff. So we're gonna move it right in that order, so we can keep it moving as quickly as we possibly can. So we'll first start off with Mr. Don Cameron with the Rental Assistance Program.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and to members of City Council, Mayor Tecklenburg, and other people on the call. I appeared before you August 22nd, 2019, and at that time, the Housing Authority had made an application to HUD to convert the 1,407 public housing units that we have to the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. And very briefly, for those who were not on that call last August and were not on City Council maybe, Rental Assistance Program is the only program that HUD has to sustain affordable housing, and that is taking public housing developments, moving it to a financial platform whereby they will contract with housing authorities to support people who are of a low-income character, equal to the number in public housing, same methodology for 20 years, renewable at the local option for a further 20-year period. So it's kind of, besides being the only ball game at the federal level, it is the best game that is currently available. The other thing I would add is currently public housing is funded by appropriations directly from the Congress. We have not been funded at 100% for operating or capital for the past 10 years. So this is the first time we're going to have an assurance of funding under contractual obligations so that we can plan off into the future. The other part that's important is until we go to the RAD program, we are prevented from mortgaging or using any of our public housing assets as collateral or liens to borrow money to renovate or to extend the useful life of the current properties. So that's kind of the 60,000 foot overview. And I'll be happy if y'all contact me to give you more information at any time. But an update is on October 24th, HUD notified us they had accepted our application and approved us to go forward with the development of a actual process. And that process involves looking at all the public housing sites that we own, making a determination whether or not they should be preserved as good, affordable housing off into the future. And if the answer is yes, how are we going to do that? If the answer is no, which is called repositioning, then HUD wanted to know how are we going to reposition that particular asset to both protect the people who currently live there, but also increase the amount of affordable housing in the community. In December of 2019, the Housing Authority had a workshop with its consultants, its board and senior staff. Out of it came a number of priorities. The first priority being a finalization that Kiowa Homes, which is 61 units in the Wagner Terrace neighborhood, Meeting Street Manor, which is 201 units on the Upper East Side, just beyond my office, and Robert Mills Manor, which is 222 units in Harrelson Village, is good, decent housing and should be preserved. So we've been moving on those three to finalize in a manner the performers and the structure of how to preserve those houses, how to invest $40,000 to $60,000 in renovation. And that is something we're working on. I'll explain more as we move forward. In February of 2020, we had a second workshop with the board and with senior staff. We've refined the process. We are still moving forward on those three, but we also added that in terms of repositioning, that we had a number of assets that seemed to lend themselves to consideration for future redevelopment. The first is 275 UG Street. It's 12 units on UG Street, just off of Meeting, behind the Grant Homes, which is owned by the Housing Authority, but is surrounded by new construction, 5 and 6 and 7-story buildings on both UG Street and also adjacent to it and around it on UG Street by Palmetto Brewery, coming back to what will be the development of 573 for 180 Ministry. And also that we should look at Coop River Courts, which is 216 units east and west, no, north and south, I'm sorry, of Sanders Clyde, bordered by Morrison Drive, where Morrison Yards is being built, and America Street. But it also makes a left-hand turn and comes up Stewart Street behind Taco Boy. So we're in the process of looking at that. Also, Ragboro Homes, which is down behind the post office on East Bay Street, 128 apartments. The northeast portion of that property, which is Drake and South, has a serious problem with flooding. The flooding issue has gotten worse and is actually coming up South Street and involving more buildings and going up, down Drake Street. So again, that's another one for consideration. And all of the other assets that we have still have to be assessed, but those are the ones in the immediate view of the board and the staff. From that, we decided there were a number of actions we needed to take. The first was we needed to engage underwriters and investment partners for Kiowa Homes. That was accomplished in June of this year. That we needed to retain borrowers counsel. That was done in June of this year. We currently have under consideration A&E services for Kiowa Homes to be finalized within the next 2 weeks. We're also advertising for a request for qualifications for a general contractor to actually become part of the team during the design development process, which is a little bit different for us as we move forward. We also advertised for and promoted one of our existing employees to be a relocation coordinator, who actually will be the person kind of boots on the ground to work with all the families. And in connection with that, we sent out notices on June the 30th to all the residents at Kiowa. On August the 3rd, hand delivered were notices about their rights and what was relocation and what's the relocation process. Last week, we actually held 4 in-person meetings, spatially distanced for families. We also have recorded that and we should have that up on our website within the next 2 weeks and available to all the residents who could not attend. People, the 12 families living at UG Street on August the 7th were delivered a letter about what was happening and what was being considered for their property. Letters regarding their rights and responsibilities should be going to them in the next 30 days. The 201 families at Meeting Street Manor should get a similar type of notice before the end of September. And with both the UG Street residents and the 201 at Meeting Street, we will begin setting up meetings during the month of September and October. Again, small numbers, but also try to get information out as well as answer question and answer period. And again, information will be posted on our website so that people will be able to access it. I wanted to emphasize, I guess, that even though COVID hit, shortly after we had a meeting with the mayor and the planning department back in March about all the sites and about studying them with regard to zoning, height restrictions, changes in the neighborhoods, that we've not paused the RAD process, which I think is for your benefit very important, that we haven't sat around and waited for COVID to get better before moving forward on all these things. I'm trying to remember. I think that really brings you in a quick and dirty sense. Oh, there is one other thing. The Housing Authority on the developments to be preserved had made the decision that we're going to be our own developer, that we're not going to turn it over to development partners. At the same time, last fall, the State Housing Finance and Development Agency published its qualified action plan for 2021. And in that, it required for development experience to have low-income housing tax credit experience within the last several years. Housing Authority has a tremendous amount of affordable housing development experience, but not tax credit experience locally and not in the last several years. We, and a lot of other people with support, asked the state to amend its QAP to consider our development experience and that of other housing authorities like Greenville, Columbia, and Spartanburg. The state housing authority did not amend their development experience, but did put a section in there that RAD development would be considered. This summer in June, we submitted a packet to the State Housing Authority asking them to approve us as a developer. We've been so notified at the end of July that based upon our submission and with the experience of our consultants, that they would look favorably upon that submission, which is, I think, a major accomplishment to us moving forward. Having said that, on properties that we reposition, like UG Street, the Housing Authority will not be the developer. We will have an ownership interest. We will retain ownership of the property. We will lease the property to a development entity of which the Housing Authority will have an ownership interest, but the Housing Authority will not be the lead developer. With that, and that took a little bit longer, I'm sorry, Gianna, than I thought. I'll be happy to answer any questions. One other thing I would mention is that I think 1 year is now, with the speed things are moving, too long between briefings with the committee. And I would suggest maybe that I should come back in January and give you an update maybe every 6 months rather than every 12 months.
I agree.
All right. I'm going to ask, wait a minute. I want to ask a quick question first. Are you adding any units to those developments that's going to be proposed?
The one on UG Street, we expect to add between 38 and 48 units. And in the draft RFP we're putting together, there are no market rate units. They're all affordable. And we're stating in what income groups we would have as goals. We will see what developers come back, but we definitely want it all to be affordable.
Anyone else got more questions?
Yes, Chairman.
Excuse me, I missed. We have Councilmember Jackson, then Councilmember Sacrum. You have a question right after Council. Oh, okay. Councilwoman Jackson, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. It's really good to have you, and I would definitely support you coming more often, especially as you're in the momentous changes that your board has been so, I think, very doing their due diligence and careful to be putting together as an action plan. And I appreciate that you took my call a couple weeks ago and allowed me to ask some more detailed questions. I was writing too fast when you were talking about the first, you have 1,472 units approximately that are owned by the Housing Authority. Is that right?
1407.
1407. And so when you applied to the RAD, just to clarify for people, are you required to put all of those 1,400 units into RAD eventually, or would you be able to, keep some in the current framework of the contract you have with HUD, just so we know the parameters?
It is too, that we start out with 1,407 and with 14.7. Now, within that, I have to say, part of that could be one option that people have who leave with us right now is they can take a housing choice voucher, Section 8. And if they choose, not the housing authority, but if they chose that they wanted to move to another location, that would be their right. But back in what is redeveloped on that property, there would be a unit with a Section 8 contract attached to it. So in that instance, we would actually get an extra one.
Right.
But
And
that
so,
option is purely up to the resident themselves.
And then what I didn't write down correctly, I'm sure, was you were talking about the contract that now you've successfully achieved with HUD to deliver your properties under the RAD program, let's just call it. It has a 20-year retention of the affordable units with a 20-year to extend, or can you just verify those?
That's correct. This is the first time HUD has done that, made a significant long-term contractual obligation.
And then what would happen at the end of 40 years? Y'all determined that?
I don't know. I would hope that the local community would want to maintain it as affordable housing, and hopefully the federal government still has an interest in supporting that effort. And I should mention too that on these, a lot of these properties, as we develop them, we will use 4% tax credits. So when we use 4% tax credits, investors will provide a lot of the equity that will be used for the rehab. When those tax benefits expire, in general, investors of tax credits want to get out from under that. At that time, the Housing Authority will be positioned to buy out the interest of these equity partners, which will again return it to public stewardship. So that the point being is that number one, it will return it to public stewardship before that 20-year and 40-year period, but also when that 20 and 40-year period come up, the federal government will be dealing with the Housing Authority, a public entity, not with a partnership, which I think will be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a very key.
I
So
won't be around.
whoever's younger than me, Ms. Jones, and everyone on the call is basically younger than I am. I want you to put a calendar date of 40 years. I'm going to go for it to support the Charleston Housing Authority, right, Chairman Mitchell?
I don't know. I got some reservation bill. Anyway, even with all the
Very much,
housing
I appreciate it.
yeah, even with all the housing that's going on, I got to be very careful with it because all the housing, most of the complexes are in the district I represent, which is Meeting Street Manor, Stewart Street, and all of the east side. And, I got to look at it very seriously of what's going to be happening and what's going to be happening to the people and how it's going to generate the people that's leaving. If they have to leave, and what's going to happen if you're going to be this diversity there, if you're not going to have it anymore. And so it's a lot of entities I have to really look at that in looking at all of this. And I know how that's changing a lot, work with them all 33 years. And so I know they have changed, but we still have to look at people, how we're going to have this diversity in the community when we get rid of all these people that have to leave. And so that's something that's kind of mind-boggling to me. And I'm looking at that seriously. I think Councilman Gregory, you had your hands up.
I did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, Don. And if we can use Hugie Street as an example, to set 275 Hugie Street,
Yes, sir.
currently 12 units.
Right.
It will be repositioned, is what we're calling it.
That's the term HUD is using. Yes.
Okay. And by repositioning, that then gives us the opportunity to add 24 more units on that site.
I think it's probably going to end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 units in total, of which 12 will be part of the RAD program.
Okay, so the 12 would be the one-for-one public housing unit replacement.
Correct.
The other units will then will be affordable, okay, but
Right.
not necessarily tenant-based affordable.
Right. Correct. They won't be subsidized.
Right, they won't be subsidized. But you'd be able to net at least one unit, I think I heard you say, that would be Section 8 from that.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So those units will totally be demolished, or will we use the shells?
No, they'll be demolished. The land will be reconfigured, and we'll have to see what the developers come up with in the next several months in terms of thoughts and ideas. I just don't know.
Okay, the units fronting Meeting Street will stay, right?
Correct.
Okay, so these are the Hugie Street units, okay? I'll stop in a second. I just want to understand. You said that there will be 417 units affected total?
1,407.
So the entire inventory?
Of public housing.
Right. Okay. So when we talk about the repositioning, that's Cooper, that's what is it? Meeting Street Manor?
No, Meeting Street will be preserved. We'll invest between $40,000 and $60,000 per unit in those renovations, but they'll be so substantial that the people cannot live there during the renovation period.
Okay. So there will be, and I'm getting back to the chairman's point, there will be, and I hate to use the term, massive relocation, potentially.
It really, it's going to be a lot. I don't know about massive. I don't know if I'd use, the reason I say that is using Meeting Street Manor as an example is we're going to keep the buildings and we're going to renovate the buildings, interior and the site. We may have to move the first, we'll say 20 families.
Okay.
To give enough mass to a contractor to work.
You're phasing.
When the contractor finishes it, then we'll phase it. People will move on site.
Okay.
When you get to UG Street, that can't happen. Those 12 families have got to move somewhere while construction is going on. They will have the right to return to that site when the new building is built, if they're appropriately sized and everything else.
Okay. Okay. I don't want to take up all the time. I have a number of other questions, but somebody else may have some questions.
Okay, I want to ask another quick question. Mr. Cameron, I remember the 275 Hugie Street was built. It wasn't to me that long ago because I moved in there and I stayed in there for 1 year. And that was part of the scattered sites, if you may, when we first started that Hugie Street, Line Street, and a couple of others, when we came up with the scattered sites to try to put units in the community. And to me, it was that was built back in what, in the 80s?
83.
83. And so to me, it's a young, I mean, it's a fabulous place inside. And I say I lived there for a year, me and my family. It was a fabulous place inside, but so they're gonna tear that down. Is that gonna be torn down?
It'll be, like I said to Mr. Gregory, it'll be torn down. The land will be reconfigured because we own Grant Homes next door. And 50 or 60 new units will be built there, of which 12 will be replacement for those 12 that come down with serving the same economic category of people, same subsidy.
Anyone else have any questions?
The mayor did.
Mr. Mayor, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Don, for coming today and giving us the update. And you kind of alluded to this when you were responding to Councilmember Gregory. But I was going to ask you just to take Kiowa Homes as an example. I mean, you're apparently getting ready to start on the renovation. You've given notices, started having meetings. So is that a case when you say a lot of relocations? Well, is Kiowa, kind of walk us through how Kiowa is going to evolve, how many people will have to relocate and that kind of thing.
Yeah, Kiowa Homes is 61 families. They're all 2 and 3 bedroom units on the site. There's no 1s, there's no 4s. We probably will have to move 10 families, empty 5 buildings for the construction phasing. Those 10 families, their first option will be a Section 8 voucher. Again, that's their choice. If they don't want to do that, we will move them to another unit within the West Side area. They may choose not to. If not, then we will transfer them to a unit somewhere else within our inventory of the 1,407. After those 5 buildings are completed, or as they're being completed and accepted each building at a time, families who live in phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 will move hopscotch around, if you will, phasing in, staying on the property. When we get down to the very last stage, those first families will have the option to move back in. If they chose not to move back in, that will free those units up possibly for people from Meeting Street or from Cooper River Courts or UT Street or some other site to move in. Some people will take the option of the Section 8 assistance. I mean,
right. So you're in effect going to have this rolling inventory of units that will be under renovation. And even though over time it might be a lot of relocation, at any one time it shouldn't be a lot. It should be a reasonable number. And those folks would always have the opportunity to come back after the units are improved and rehabbed, correct?
that's correct. And I think that's a good way of viewing it and saying it, is that at any one time, we shouldn't have, let's just use a number, 50. Maybe there'll be 20 or 30 families at any given time that we're moving, but it shouldn't be a massive number. As a, for instance, just looking ahead, if we do get to the point of Cooper River Courts, well, Cooper River Courts is 3 distinct blocks. One south of Sanders Clyde, one north of Sanders Clyde, and one again on Stewart Street and America Street. They are very distinct. It may turn out that it is in the best interest of everybody to phase any kind of development, that we just tackle 1 block at a time, not 3 blocks at one time, just because the numbers are too big and it's too upsetting to the community.
Right.
I think we've got to be very cautious and very thoughtful as we progress, you know, with each one of these phases.
I heard you. Yes, sir.
One more question, Mr. Cameron. Even if these people decide to take the voucher program and go into a Section 8 voucher, I don't know how it changed, but it used to only be 60 days to go out and find another dwelling place. And to me, but I know it's, you know, while working, Mr. Cameron and I go way back, but people couldn't find places for what the voucher or Section 8 was for. So that, you know, it kind of scares me that these people, if they lose their Section 8 certificate or voucher, and because that's what they accept, what's going to happen to them in the interim, because they already accepted that and they say they're not coming back. They want to take the Section 8 certificate or voucher, wherever the case may be, and they don't find a place in 60 days. They're out. They're homeless to me.
Yeah, let me mention on the voucher, it's really 2 components. The first component is initial relocation, so that the renovation or the demolition or whatever it is, the work can be done. That time period is 90 days instead of 60. That they either find someplace or they go to a housing unit. If they decide that they want to permanently relocate someplace else, they have 180 days on that voucher. And also, one of our staff people is required to work with them to help them secure proper relocation. But the times are 90 days and 180 days.
Okay, so for instance, if they don't find if they don't find something in 90 days, because they already accepted it, what happened then? That's what I was
They-
looking at doing too.
Right, they can always stay in existing public housing that we have. That
Okay,
is always the first option.
Oh, I think I get a little mixed up here with that. I mean, if they accept the Section 8 certificate or the voucher, so that means they have the 90 days to go and find a place. So if they don't find a place in 90 days, they lose the voucher. So
But they'll be transferred to another public housing unit during
Okay.
construction.
that's what I wanted to know.
And they still have the option during the construction period of saying, I don't want to go back to Kiowa. I'd like to take a voucher.
Yeah.
And they have 180 days, once they get the voucher, to find some other alternative.
Okay, I just want everybody to understand everything I'm saying when I'm kind of bringing out. Anyone else
Yeah,
have?
Yeah, if I can just piggyback.
Okay.
Generally, Don, folks don't go back. Am I correct in most of these instances? I mean, I'm talking about a national trend that generally when people relocate this place, they don't go back to the unit. That's not to say that the need is, we have hundreds and hundreds on the waiting list in order that have a need that could also go in those units. But generally, people don't come back. Am I correct?
I think in a national sense, it is correct if two things occur. One, if there's a reasonable market that people can try to take advantage of,
Right,
which doesn't exist in Charleston.
right,
If they take a voucher, they're going to have to move out of the city.
yeah,
Or the construction period is so long that if I'm out 2 years, why don't I
Right.
just stay out?
right,
But if it's a short construction period and the market is softened, and not to digress, but COVID is affecting the rental market right now. I mean, I've already talked to some apartment people that Section 8 rents aren't too far off from where they would like to be currently, and that's because of COVID. So we may have a reasonable situation where more people stay than go. But if they go, it doesn't change HUD's commitment to the number on the doors.
Right.
There still will be 1,407 doors that HUD will support for the next 20 to 40 years, whether the same people go back to those doors or not.
What is our turnover rate? And will you be able to squeeze in any wealth creation opportunities for folks? Will any of them be able to get a choice voucher and perhaps use their Section 8 subsidy to buy?
On the second part, yes, it's always available. On the first question, I think so.
Okay, because, and why I asked that, especially the first question is the wealth creation question for me, okay?
Right.
I don't think that we do enough of that through the public housing authority process. And I know why. One, affordability. There aren't a lot of units out there that people could use their choice voucher for to buy. But I guess I'm asking whether or not we will have the opportunity through the RAD program, through some type of subsidy, perhaps working with the city, to make some of the home ownership opportunities affordable, like we've done as a city in other places. I just think that it's very important if we do this kind of massive redevelopment, that something has to come out of it to make sure that the people have an opportunity to own a home and using their federal subsidy, okay, to help them to buy the unit.
Yes, we have two programs. We have a Section 8 home ownership program. We've got about 18 families involved in it. And we've got a family self-sufficiency program where we've got about 62 families involved in it. And we have a staff person dedicated specifically to that. That would include these families if they chose to take a voucher, yes.
Okay, that's very important to me. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I think Mayor Tecklenburg has his hand up.
Oh, okay, I didn't see it.
So this is more observation question, just following up on the discussion about those who are choosing to take the voucher or moving to another property. It seems to me that that really only almost applies to the very initial group that those, take Kiowa Homes again, for example, those 10 families you were referring to, because once you get those 10 units renovated, if I'm living at Kiowa Homes in unit number 11, and now you're giving me the option just to move right next door in a newly rehabbed unit with a new kitchen, a new bathroom, everything like that. I'm just going to move from one unit to the other, right?
Well, I believe most people are going to do that because they like where they live, they like the neighborhood, location, transportation, everything about it. But under the HUD program, it is an option that people have to know they have.
Okay.
Truthfully, I don't think a great number of people will take advantage of it just because of the costs in our area.
Understood.
But it's an option.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Keith Waring. I'm on speakerphone.
okay.
I'm trying to come on the Zoom link, but I guess, can anybody answer this question? The city's program that we used in Ashleyville to help people buy a home, the subsidy that we put in, can that be matched with the voucher program that Mr. Cameron's talking about to help people with, you know, down payment and the like to acquire the house?
I can let Ms. Johnson answer it, but I believe it's going to be pertaining to their income-wise, what they're making, and credit-wise. They still have to go through the same procedures, but they still have to meet that income guideline too. And
Right. I guess my question really is, can what Mr. Cameron's talking about be matched with what Ms. Johnson and her team has done, you know, with several ownership opportunities?
I think it probably could, Mr. Waring. The difficulty, I think, is that the cost would have to be further written down. You have to keep in mind that the population we're talking about is at 80% AMI, and the first-time home buyers program, I think,
Mr. Cameron, you kind of blanked out. You said you have to keep in mind, and that's the last thing I heard.
I'm sorry. You have to keep in mind that the people who will be displaced that we're talking about are between 50 and 80% of the area-wide median income. I think the ownership program starts above that 80 percentile. So
it doesn't.
It does not?
It does not. So the only challenge I see in getting folks into those homes, Councilmember Waring, would be to make sure they can qualify for a mortgage. The home initiative program literally starts at 50% AMI up to 120%, but they will have to be able to qualify for a mortgage.
right.
The permanent subsidy that we leave in that house would be available to them to reduce what they have to finance.
That's great. So then basically, if they got the income and maybe the credit, obviously the credit, then they'd be a good candidate then.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And Councilman Waring, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, of which the Housing Authority has, is a program that helps them to get creditworthy, help them to try to save some money, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don, save some money toward the down payment, as well as assuring that they have employment.
Right.
So
that's all correct.
yes, so the Family Self-Sufficiency, Councilman Waring, is one program that the Housing Authority has to try to get people in that income range prepared to become homeowners.
Right. Councilman Masacre?
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Johnson, you mentioned having to go through a bank or mortgage. Is that just a normal bank? And is that something that we could help navigate that through for these potential customers? Or is there a special bank that folks are applying through?
No, sir. We have banking relationships established, of course. But these individuals may have a banker that they deal with on a regular basis, and if so, they can certainly pursue them. But we do work with a number of banks in our community, so we will refer those clients and they can pursue a first mortgage from a bank that we refer unless they have an established relationship.
But is there any advantage through us helping them usher through that? Meaning, is there anything that the city can do to help them ensure they get the mortgage that we're talking about?
So literally what we do, a member of my team walks them through what we call a pre-application process, where we look at their credit, we look at their debt to income ratio, we look at how much house they can afford before we refer them to a bank, such that we ensure their level of success. Unless, of course, they don't disclose something of that nature. But typically, once they leave Florence, they have a good idea that they can be successful in their purchase.
Thank you.
All righty. Any more questions?
Last question.
All right.
Don, when are we going to look at the Gadsden Green community for a RAD?
It is further down on the priority list. And part of the rationale being is the first priority was preservation of existing stock, the best that we thought we had.
Yes.
The second is to start out with a small property like UG Street in an attempt to navigate the HUD process,
Yes.
so that we will gain experience and knowledge before we tackle the more complex issues.
Makes sense.
Gadsden Green is 264 families built in 41 and 68. I think that's going to be a very complex one, but I think we want to gain as much experience as possible before we tackle that one.
Okay, makes sense. And there may be some other programs, if things change, that might assist us in that endeavor.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Any other questions? Well, I thank you very much, Mr. Cameron. I know we had you in the hot seat for a while, but you know how things are.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to leave.
All righty. Okay.
Thank you.
We're moving.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Don.
Mr. Cameron.
Bye, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move right along to the next on the agenda.
That was just for information, right?
Just for
Correct.
information only. Just information only.
So Mr. Bradford is next, Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, I don't have it in front of me. Mr. Bradford, you on?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to Megan Mills first.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you for the community development, city council and the mayor for having us today. This is an exciting step to start talking, to present to you today and also start this dialogue. My name is Megan Mills and I'm a board member of the Lowline and also the outreach chair for the Friends of the Lowline. Founded in 2012 by Mike Messner and Tom Bradford, the Friends of the Lowcountry Lowline are working alongside the city of Charleston to put together a plan for the space that highlights surrounding neighborhoods, addresses citywide flooding, and gives pedestrians and bikers a safe, dedicated path. This future park, runs north-south along the spine of the peninsula for the former railroad, but over the years in the acquisition and planning, it has become so much more than that. It has the potential of becoming the second largest park on the peninsula at 40 acres and can be a space for bike and pedestrian safety. Working with the development side of the Lowline, we are moving forward. We have completed many steps to show the importance of this park and the potential it has. With the help of Scott Parker of Design Works and Alan Davis of the Civic Design Center, we have completed an opportunity plan. Then we worked with Kimley Horn to produce studies on stormwater and a cost estimate. And then Alan Davis, again with the Civic Design Center, is currently working on an implementation plan that gives us a roadmap on how this project, when broken into bite-sized pieces, can really come together. So all of this is really amazing work. They've done an amazing job showing the nuts and bolts of this project coming together. But I want to talk about the people who will use the park. The people are the heart of every park. And the Lowline, we see it as an important space that accommodates everyone. We see this as a space that invites co-creation. meaning that people from all different backgrounds, races, socioeconomic status can enjoy and make their space their own. Since I have joined the board in 2016, my focus has been the neighborhoods adjacent to the low line and making sure that this is not only for a Charleston of the future, but for its current residents as well. So in the past, we've done a few tabling events, we've done a few trash pickups to drum up excitement to build initial awareness, and they were pretty successful. But now, after the amazing work that we have with the opportunity plan, with the design works of Kimley Horn and the Civic Design Center, we are ready for a new type of engagement, and this is where our grassroots comes in. So this is a small snapshot of what we've been doing for community engagement. We're currently at 518 surveys completed. We are passing out flyers to being distributed around to local shops. We have 250 plus door hangers going out, and I mean, we have more going for that. We're also working on partnerships. So that is really huge. And I'll talk about that a little later, but we're partnering and we're presenting to the Urban Land Institute, the Low Country Local First, Charleston Promise Neighborhood, Wagner Terrace. The Day Foundation has partnered us with a 4-part video series. We've done something with Ohm Radio. So we're really trying to get the word out. And so in March of 2020, we were ready to start public meetings, but obviously 2020 had other plans. As we encourage people to stay home and socially distance, we've had a new and renewed importance of park space and being outside. So we launched a survey to capture the feedback. We've, as I've said before, we've only had about 518, but with the current small scope we have, we are hearing major things of what Charleston residents want. They want a safe space with lighting. They want restrooms, gathering space, a green space with educational opportunities for plants in an urban setting. But most importantly, they want to be able to ride their bike, walk, and even skate safely without the threat of vehicles. And they want to hold us accountable to be inclusive and transparent in the process. And so I'm just going to kind of show you a little bit of the survey that we're seeing so far. So out of the 518, we've had 60% from the 29403 zip code. When they prompt that they live in either the 29403 and the 29401, then we ask follow-up questions. So 64% of them own their houses. And then how long have they lived in the peninsula? So it ranges from about 1 to 5 years to 6 to 10 years is what we're mostly seeing. The average age there is we're seeing a lot from the 25 to 34 age group. Majority are female and majority are white. But so also one of the first questions that we ask, and I feel like this is most important. So we gave them 10 things and we asked them to rank them from 1 to 10, 1 being the most important for them. All of these are obviously important markers for the park, but we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting which one is really most important for them. So lighting and safety is obviously a clear number 1, followed by bike and pedestrian. Then you kind of see the middle, you know, they all have different kind of in the middle. Flooding improvements obviously is one. F&B options are somewhat there. But one thing that we did see is that pet focused activities are not a priority. So that was good to know. And so then when you break up this park, so it is a linear park. So we've broken it up into 3 major sections. It's called the urban core, the park area, and then the north central corridor. Each of them are going to have their own personality. We don't want anyone to think that from Marion Square to Mount Pleasant Street is going to be the same park. They're going to look and feel a little different. So when we've shown each picture in the survey and then asked them what they see in each photo or in each section of the park. So this is the urban core. It's from Marion Square to Line Street. So this obviously was very high of alternative route to King Street. So again, that transportation. Bathrooms were another major one with dining and gathering space right behind it. But people were strong that they did not want retail shopping there. So that was one that they put an X by when they did not want it. Then we go to the parks. So the parks is pretty much from Line Street all the way to Grove Street. These have 2 big parks. New Market Creek will be a huge space for stormwater management. We're very excited for that. And then also the Lowline Park, that's going to be the widest area. So the most green space we're going to be able to have on this park. So obviously we heard from the neighborhood that, or from the surveys that nature trails open space were a priority. Large event space, it kind of, some people did not want that, while some people did. And then the beer garden got a pretty heavy no. So we've taken that feedback. And then finally, the North Central Corridor. So this is where more of our residential area will be. Also huge potential for recreation. So under that underpass, we're going to be able to do a lot of activating this space. We did hear, obviously strongly, as you can see, that access to public transportation is pretty important for everyone. And that's really exciting because it does match up to the Mount Pleasant Street Park and Ride that just got approved. And we're really excited to be partnering with the Low Country Bus Rapid Transit in the future. We see ourselves as partners. And then also the open air markets. That looks pretty along the lines of what we've offered in the opportunity plan. So we're really excited that people responded well to that. So they are allowed to leave comments in this. We are getting a wide range of comments, but when we dissect them into plantings, transportation, water, and recreation, and we're able to really, we go through all of these things, and we're going to be able to incorporate this, take this from the opportunity plan, hopefully to a master plan, and really listen to the neighborhood and the community when they give us this feedback. But when talking about the community, we cannot steer away from their concerns. In 2017, Realtor.com put out a report which ranked Charleston as the #1 on the list of the fastest gentrifying cities in the US. So as Charleston is dealing with gentrification on the peninsula already, we have learned from other linear parks around the country that these can expedite this process. Throughout this, the city of Charleston and the Friends have been keenly aware of this issue. There are 2 parcels adjacent to the low line slated for affordable housing. And in 2020, the city of Charleston, as you guys know, published the Housing for a Fairer Charleston, which maps out tools like funding, education, planning and zoning, and capacity tools that can help use our current neighbors. Again, this park is only as strong as our partnerships will be key. We're only as strong as our neighbors. So we need to work with many organizations as possible to get involved in this project. Another concern was the groups already using the underpass. The Charleston skating community has a DIY park under the underpass, which has huge community support for it to remain. We did hear that very strongly throughout the surveys. But these are the conversations. Oh, and so yeah, I just wanted to show, this is the concerns question that we ask on the surveys. So obviously safety seems to be a main concern for everyone. The changing neighborhoods, it really did range between being a main concern or being the 5th. Funding is in there. So you can kind of see how people are responding to that. But these are the conversations we have to make this park for everyone. We want a high-level park that is equitable for all people. And in the times we are in now, we should have a greater responsibility to make the best park for Charleston. We can approach development with the acknowledgement of past injustices and find value in new stories and in the past ones too. If we focus on the locals, the people who actually live and use the space, and acknowledge Charleston's rich diversity, not only for tourism, then that is when we will be successful. And this is really just the beginning. So as I said earlier, we are hitting we are hitting the ground running. So we are doing, passing out flyers. We're going door to door. So we have a lot of things working. But we can also activate the space. So the pictures you're seeing of the low line, these are stellar images, but we can be using this space right now. So we will have to have a series of trash pickups to pick up the debris that's under the low line at this point, but then we can activate the space. So we can do markets, we can do food trucks, fitness classes, basketball hoops. We can also highlight the things that are already there. So like our skating community, and there's a bike polo community down there. So the people are ready, people are emailing us, they're excited to get involved in this process. As we are growing, we're really excited because we'll be able to determine a great volunteerism program and then get people really activated in the space. We're also launching a new logo. So another little thing that's exciting for us is we have new images we're doing. We worked with obviously a local firm. So we're really excited about this. Excuse me, I went too fast. We are looking at new wayfinding. So we wanted really vibrant colors, something that's new and different for the community. So this is kind of the wayfinding we were looking for. And then merchandise. So we see this, on hats and bags. So we're very excited to get started. We are going to be hosting a trash pickup. So with Keep Charleston Beautiful, Jamie over there at the city, we are partnering. And also a community member reached out and she actually is kind of leading this. So on September 23rd, it's where Simmons Street's dead ends to the low line. We'll be out there passing out information and then we'll be cleaning it up as well. So we're really excited for that. So thank you guys so much. I will pass it to Tom.
Okay. Before you pass it to Tom, let me ask a quick question. Sure. I know you have the Wagner Terrace area down there, but all this where the low line is coming, it's all in the district I represent. Everything is in the district I represent. And you have between the North Central and East Central, this is where the low line is coming through. So really, I need everyone to really contact the individuals of East Central, North Central, the East Side, and Mazik Ragsborough, because you're going up in Marion Square.
Yes, so all of them. Yeah, so just to be clear, all of them have received the email, the information. I have requested to speak at their neighborhood associations. Okay. So the North Central neighborhood president has shared it with her people. East Central, we've had great conversation about things that we can be doing. And then when I started the door-to-door tags, we talked about that. So we are in contact. LaTanya at the East Side, we are also in contact. So everybody's received it. I just haven't had any. They say they're, some of them aren't doing their neighborhood meetings right now. Yeah. So Wagner Terrace was the only one I could get in front of at this point.
So I just want to make sure, because I don't want them to be coming after me and say, oh, we didn't know anything about it. Oh, we don't know. And that's what they'll do. So that's why I want to make sure, because it's really in between those two neighborhoods that the low line is coming, East Central, North Central.
Exactly. No, the North Central, and I've been very clear that it's a big project. It's called the North Central Corridor. So, we need their involvement. So yeah, I am a resident of North Central. So I understand how important that is. Right. And so, yes, and also the West Side, because what they're calling the pinch, which is that little skinny way between the parks, like that will be huge. I mean, it's going to be huge for the entire residential peninsula, but it's definitely in these corridors. So I completely agree.
Right. The reason why I say that, because that's where the people are living, and that's where the people will be affected, and little affected in those areas because they live closer to the park. Yep. The rest of it, So you want to make sure that they understand exactly what's going on, because I don't want them to come back later on and come back to the city and say, oh, we don't want this. We don't know what's going on. Because I know what's going to happen, because they're all African-American that's live along that corridor where the low line is coming. And they were, some people were there a long time. And so we want to make sure that they are interested and they're buying into this process that's happening.
So when we did the door-to-door, and I'm sorry, and then I'll take these questions. But so when we did the door-to-door tags, we dropped them at everywhere that dead ends first, just because that is our #1 concern. And we added phone numbers, email addresses, any way that they can contact us just to get more information if they're not able to fill out the survey readily. We did receive a few calls, questions about easement, where the property starts. So we are starting to start that dialogue. And I do, as a neighbor, I know once you see the cranes, it's too late for public comment. Exactly. So this is really crucial now, because the low line is excited, and we have a lot of partners that are excited. So we need to make sure that these neighbors understand what this looks like and understands what this is going to be prior to getting this. So we are on the same page.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Megan. First, I love your energy. I love it. My question is, why are we calling it the Low Country Low Line? The Low Country is much bigger than Charleston. Why isn't it the Charleston Low Line? Why isn't it the Holy City Low Line? I mean, where did we come up with Low Country Low Line as the name of it? Especially,
Council,
especially
Ca-
when most of the bills come. You mean-
Councilman, this is Tom Bradford. If I could take that. You know, when we began this whole effort, there was a question as to what this ought to be called, and we were looking at the High Line in New York, which is elevated, and we thought low line, and it, having something to go with it. This is all a very ad hoc process, and frankly, I think we're totally open to a better name for this, and whenever we find it. But frankly, we haven't found it yet. We may next week, we may next year. We're open to it.
Okay, I mean, the low line is fine. It's just
Sure.
low country, I think.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
I think most people will just refer to it just the low line.
Yeah, the low
You know, I
line.
think low country will slowly fade in time. But
Yeah, but just let everybody know where it is.
yeah, that's very true.
Listen, I'm excited. I'm excited to tell you about a new low line initiative. Back when my friend Ray Huff pointed out that other people had observed this, that at Mount Pleasant Street, that used to be the gateway to the city.
Correct.
And he looked down the low line from Mount Pleasant Street. He said, "This should be the gateway to the city." And then a couple of years later, I was bumping across the tracks that were still under the asphalt on Mount Pleasant Street with Mike Messner. I said, "This should be the gateway to the city." And he said, "Well, let's see if we can do it." So we began negotiating with Norfolk Southern at that point, which was an arduous process. At the time, we envisioned a narrow track down the middle of the city. I must say that as we've studied this and appreciated it and talked to people, it is profoundly more complicated and more beneficial to the city than we ever imagined back at that time. So Megan, if you would take back the screen, and we'll begin the next little section. So the latest thing is to give ownership of the low line to the neighborhoods by telling their history. It's the Low Line History Project. I've been very committed and working very hard on this, and we think it is going to become a major reason for building the low line. Next. As most of us probably understand, that railroad was built largely with the labor of enslaved people. So the low line can help them and the people who still live there now step out from the shadows of the past, reveal the stories, the families, everything that's happened there. Next. The low line, we all knew it as a single track in its later stages, but at one point it was a flourishing piece of Charleston's commerce. It was a big complex. The buildings there north of Line Street, were one on the south side is the car refurbishment plant. Another one was the two buildings on the other side of the track were warehouses associated with the low line. Down south of Columbus Street, where Piggly Wiggly is now located, is the Roundhouse. Now the turntable, I think, I've heard, is still under the Piggly Wiggly. Next. There is the Sanborn map showing the Roundhouse. Looking at these Sanborn maps is just tantalizing, because you've got names of businesses. You can see the commerce that was going on, how populated it was, and you can just begin to imagine what it was like. We have to actually bring all this to life. Next, please. There is an actual picture of the Roundhouse that I stole from the Historic Charleston Foundation's website. It's fascinating to see that. Next. Again, tantalizing clues. Road and Company Grist and Hominy Mill, George Hacker and Son. A guy by the name of Jim Rode redid our kitchen. And I'll bet you Jim Rode is a relative or a descendant of this road. Across the street, you can't see it here, but there was a police station right across King Street. Go ahead, please. More recently and more tragically for the neighborhoods was the construction of I-26. Every one of these little boxes on this map represents a home or a business that was destroyed to build the low line. This too is part of the history of the low line, part of the stories that have to be brought back to life. And the low line can reconnect the neighborhoods that were severed by I-26. Next. This is a shot of one of the homes that was taken down to make way for I-26. Next. And this is a new acquaintance of mine, Andrea Hazel, a Charleston African-American artist, doing a series of these wonderful watercolors based upon these forensic photographs of homes that were taken down by I-26. She's got a whole series of these lovely paintings showing people where in the other photographs there were no people anymore because the bulldozers were moving in. So she's bringing this back to life the same way we hope to bring it back to life. Next. So the low line can give voice to the people whose stories were never heard by telling their stories, give them shares in the ownership of the low line. Next. The low line will be a walkable, bikeable history lesson, a real life extension of our museums and institutes, and an affirmative declaration of racial equity and inclusion. Next. So changing gears here, you know, the new priorities of the city, flooding, affordable housing, high on the list, both of which we address on the low line. Next. Here is a shot of taken from a presentation by the developer just north of Line Street. It's his lifestyle. You can see the buildings, the way they kind of envision the site that they're going to build. And you'll notice right there already in the picture is the low line. So this has taken root among the developers. It is a serious factor in all the discussions and planning. Next. So that's it, you know, and as I told the mayor recently, coming out of COVID and with the new discussion about racial equity and Black Lives Matter, we think that the time to build the low line is upon us. We think that it can help generate the kind of excitement and economic activity that can lift the city, help it financially, help businesses, help people. And we also think that with the emphasis on equity and inclusion, that it will be a major statement by the city of Charleston in this conversation. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. We're here to answer any further questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Bradford or for Megan?
I don't have any questions, but I
A comment?
Yeah, I think it was a great presentation. And I think getting into the equity and inclusion is great, because I think most of us know that the majority of the people who were displaced as a result of I-26, as a result of the Septima Clark Parkway, and I can go on and on, were African Americans. Yeah. Because during that time, African Americans were the majority on the peninsula. Right. And so to look at us now. So I think that you're placing that into this. I'm quite grateful for. Thank you.
It's only right.
Councilman Waring?
Well, I saw the mayor's hand up. I'll defer to him.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I didn't see you. Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think Councilman Waring had his hand up first.
Oh,
but
okay.
I just wanted to comment and thank Tom and Megan for the presentation and all the work that they and their team have been doing, along with, and they mentioned Alan Davis on our staff has been a partner arm in arm with the team on this, and they've really brought this thing a long way. A lot of remarkable work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, I'm on board with this low line. And I agree with Councilman Gregory, Mr. Bradford. something better than Low Country should go in front of the Low Line.
Okay.
Oh, it's just going to become known as the Low Line. Holy City Low Line. I don't know.
Yeah.
All of that sounds great to me.
Okay.
But that said, I think in conjunction with the research and your history on this one, I think it's incumbent, Mr. Mayor, upon us, you, me as a council member, and all our colleagues on council, to somehow coordinate the affordable housing as being a lead component on this. I know they can't, the Friends of the Low Line can't do that, but somehow we're going to have to coordinate. Believe it or not, I got a call from a constituent. I don't know whether it's Councilman Saccharins or Councilman Gregory this morning. My ears should be like an elephant size. I was a good listener this morning. I won't call her name, but she lives on San Souci Street, so whoever district that is, she's fired up and ready to go against the Low Line. And I keep telling her, listen, there's some strong components. I told her about the out parcels, Mr. Mayor, that we bought for affordable housing. But for this Low Line to kind of get going, the city has to have its dominoes in line to Ms. Shaw Johnson on that parcel that I think it's, it vacillates, I don't know, 45, 46 units to maybe low 50s, 52, 53 units. I don't know. I think that's been somewhat put back on the burner, but I think as we showed the pictures, Mr. Bradford, of the areas north of Line Street, we got to get an elevation on what that affordable housing is going to look like and how many of those units are there. Because we all know how hard we're working on this affordable housing piece, but you'll be shocked at how many affordable housing. We've had a very good last 2-3 years, in particular, in creating affordable housing on the peninsula. I mean, in the city of Charleston, we've done a poor job getting that word out, in particular in the African American community, that these units are being created. The units that Mr. Cameron and his team are doing right there on Lee Street, I have to explain to a number of people that those are affordable housing units. They actually think those are market rate housing units on the bridge site that came down. Same lady, I told her, you know, the Councilman Mitchell, the South Carolina State building has actually got its roof on. She said, man, I got to ride over there and take a look. She didn't even know the construction had started. So that tells me we got to get that word out a little bit better, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members, and obviously the Friends of the Low Line. We all in this together. So that coordination of the before, as Megan said, before the cranes get going, it'd be really good to get some affordable housing going at the very least simultaneously, so we can say displacement. Let me tell you, we're putting back. I'm gonna split the difference: 50 units here or whatever, how many units there, and all of a sudden it's a much more palatable conversation when people come up and say what we're not doing. And let me tell you, we got a good story to tell what we are doing. So wanted to throw that one out there, and kudos to Mr. Bradley and Megan for, and you're right, you got that high energy, Megan. Share some of it with us.
Mayor, you have something else, Mr. Mayor? No. Anybody else have any questions?
Councilmember Mitchell, yeah, this is
Jackson.
Yes, Jackson. I appreciate that, and I really just wanted to second. That was going to be my suggestion, Councilmember Waring, that we do need to feature. I understand we've had to take an environmental timeout on the actual property where we intend to build the affordable housing community, but to show it, if you're going to be showing, you know, all the visuals that go around Marion Square and the Post and Courier building and all of that, I think that would definitely tell an illustrated story that will be true. I also was just trying to think, and you know, I'm no expert, but we have several longstanding Peninsula community members here. Where should we be suggesting that the Low-Line outreach teams, you know, make themselves known? Is the Chronicle a good place? I mean, I know that, you know, we're not having a lot of faith community gatherings, and you've got the neighborhood communities on your list, but it seems like if we're hearing, you know, sort of the myths that are being talked about, that are not accurate or need more accuracy, that surely we could think of some avenues of communication that Megan and her teammates could take advantage of. So I don't know what they are, but you all do.
I think Megan's approach door to door is the way to go.
Yeah, it's a grassroots.
Keep knocking on doors like she's doing, really.
That's the grassroots. That's the best way to do it right now. It's take a little time, but that's the best way, because some people are not going to read paper. It's their choice. Some people are not going to look at the television, their choice. But that grassroots, what she is doing, I think that's marvelous. Mr. Bradford. Oh,
yes, I just want to add.
1 second, Mr. Bradford. Let me get Councilman Sacrum first.
Mr. Chairman, I think Councilmember Appel had his hand up as well.
Okay, I'll get him after Councilman Sacrum, and then I'll
Thank
go
you,
to
Chair. I'll be very brief. I just want to say thanks to Tom and Megan for another overview. I'm very supportive of it. Two things I just want to mention to piggyback on Councilman Waring. In addition to the affordable housing focus, you know, as I see this get built out over the years, I do see nodes of opportunity for small business enterprise all along. So we need to be very intentional about reaching out to our Black community to figure out what opportunities are we providing in those nodes, and not, you know, repeating, you know, the history that we have, and making sure that we're intentional about carving out spaces. So I'm not sure who's in, you know, if that's the city or if that's, you know, Friends of the Lowline and how that works, but I do think there's opportunity for, you know, that relationship between affordable housing and making sure that we create small business nodes. And as I see it, you know, we will see additional commerce through that low line, correct?
Yes. And yeah, and just to jump in before is like, yes, that is kind of the next frontier that we're really hearing from, and we are really excited to pursue. We talked to Low Country Local Work, Low Country Local First about, you know, how to prioritize small businesses. You know, when we're talking about these markets, you know, we could be really strategic. I mean, we have open air that has an overpass, so, you know, no weather conditions. So that could be really exciting. And also with the development you're seeing on the Upper Peninsula, you know, a lot of them are approaching us. They're very excited about the project, and why not challenge them to be more open for first-time business owners? Or, you know, we're creating a space that will bring, you know, like people to those shops. So I think that gives us us to work together to give us a good upper hand when asking for that.
Great.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Appel, Councilman Appel. Then I come back to you finish, Councilman Sacrum?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan and Tom, great job, great presentation. When y'all are done downtown, you got to come over to West Ashley and help us take the Greenway to the next level, maybe in 2030 or so. But very exciting, and I think that Councilmember Waring had some very good points about how we can put together a sort of more comprehensive story here, so that we're not unintentionally sending the wrong signals and wrong messages. But to Councilmember Sacron's point, I do think that there's a way to have everybody benefit from this and it not be a zero-sum game. And I think that's an exciting opportunity, and look forward to seeing the evolution of this process in the coming weeks and months.
Great. And I just want to comment, like we do, and I'm sorry, I'm going to comment, is that we do see this as such a bigger thing than the parks. So that's what's so exciting to partner and have such a great relationship with the city, is because, like, you know, it is going to touch on so many important parts that the peninsula is having: stormwater, transportation, affordable housing. Like it's so much more than a park. So that's what's really exciting.
I just wanted to, I heard I heard the co-chairman of the commission used a term, and that term was intentional. And I want to interpret what intentional means as it relates to the Commission on Racial Conciliation. Intentional means bring the dollars, bring the resources. So whenever you hear anyone from the commission use the term intentional, we're talking about identifying the dollars as well. Just so as we move forward, when you hear us use intentional, we're talking about the money. Where is it?
Here.
All right. Who was next?
Mr. Chairman, I just
Mr.
wanted
Bradford,
to,
okay.
in response to some of the observations about coordinating all this, with livable housing, affordable housing, equity, inclusion, and everything. At the mayor's direction, there's a large meeting between city staff and Friends of the Lowline next week to give some very deliberate thought to just that. So thanks to the mayor for directing us in that way.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I just want to make sure that we work hard to engage the African American community, and secondly, that we have an RFP going out probably next month pertaining to the affordable housing in that area.
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Gregory, then we'll move on.
Yeah, and I'll be done. Could you include our chairman of economic empowerment of the commission in that discussion? And we can give you all of his particulars.
Okay.
Because we do have a chairman for economic empowerment, of which I think this really falls under. And we'd like to be a part of that dialogue.
All righty. We'll put that, make sure that's a part of the minutes so we can make sure we bring that up.
Okay, Megan, you heard me, right?
Yep, I got it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. And thinking about this, another ally to this process, believe it or not, is Charleston water system. And Mr. Mayor, I think it'd be great as Mr. Bradley and Ms. Mills go about enhancing the plan. Where or what role, I don't know if you're that far down the road on engineering standpoint, do you see services, you talk about bathrooms and things like that, where do you see that the infrastructure for that needing to be put in place, the water, sewer, et cetera, that kind of thing?
I'll be brief. I'll be brief. In the cost estimate that was done for us by Kimley Horn, approximately 1/3 of the projected construction expenses go into stormwater management. And believe me, we've been looking very carefully at how that can work and what other utilities can be located underneath the low line. And that would obviously include water.
Thank you.
Well, what I'm really saying, some of those services, I like to know where the main sewer trunk lines are in relation to what some of the areas you like to put your restrooms, for example, or some of the other areas down there. So I'm telling you, it would be really good to get up front on that one with CWS. Shorten a few footsteps for you guys.
Okay. Well, we have one more presentation, so I don't want to prolong this any longer.
I know. And just last point is that if you guys do have any suggestions of people I need to reach out to, just add it to the minutes. My email is megan@lowcountrylowline.org. I am happy to talk to any person, so let me know.
All right, Megan, I'll come back and get some of your vitamins later. Any other questions? We'll move right along. And thank you very much, Mr. Bradford and Megan, for coming and explaining the low line. So this is going to be received as information. We don't have to take a vote on this tonight.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We're moving right along. Next is Laurel Island, Mr. Robert Clements. You still around?
Sir.
All right, you're on the hot seat.
Okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for your time today and giving us the opportunity to speak. Let me introduce my team. In this room, I have Rhett Reidenbach and Jenalie Kabuchi from Revere, and then Eddie Bello with Bello Garris is remote, and then Brian Hellman with Hellman, Yates, and Tisdale is also remote. So what we're going to do is I'll start and then I'll hand off to Rhett, and then we'll hand off to Eddie as we go through the presentation. It's one point though I'd like to make. It's so refreshing to hear the conversations about affordable housing because, Gianna deserves enormous amount of credit for what she's been able to do in the last 3 to 5, even longer years. And it's been an uphill fight. And so as your chair of the Mayor's Commission on Homelessness and Affordable Housing, I got to give a shout out to Gianna. So let's go ahead. Yes, sir.
You go right ahead. No.
Yeah. Okay. Over the last 200 years, Laurel Island has had a great history of readapting itself to our community's needs. Beginning in 1827, Robert Mills designed the armory at Laurel Island with a barracks and officers' quarters and 9 powder magazines. In 1910, Standard Oil built a transportation station or transport station way out in the marsh. And 1918, Laurel Island's marsh was diked and it became a dredged spoil area. 1950, the armory and the associated buildings were gone. 1960, Laurel Island became 2 separate landfills, one known as Holston, the other is Romney Beach, for household garbage, very controlled. And that's important because what that means is I don't have migrating contaminants in the soil. Holston was on the south end and Romney Beach at the north. Holston stopped receiving waste in '84 and was permanently closed in '87. Romney Beach stopped receiving in '89 and was permanently closed in 1995. 2003, Lou Burdata bought the property. 2008, Bob again tried a resort concept there, but the Great Recession killed that. In 2010 to 2013, we evaluated port uses for the property, but by 2014, we were focused on mixed use concept for the property. Development was moving quickly up the peninsula, and so it made sense. In 2015, the city decided that Coolblow Street was the chosen location for the bridge to the island. In 2016 and 2017, Lorelei was contemplated. Unfortunately, they wanted too much retail product, which required a 4-lane bridge. Mayor Tecklenburg said no, and that was the end of that. But what ensued, what went on at that time was a tremendous amount of public outreach where we learned a great deal about what the public wanted. Later, we would combine that research with our recent public outreach. After Lorelei went south, we went after solving gating issues. So 2018 through 2020, we negotiated with the county and put the right-of-way for the bridge under contract. In 2020, we contracted to buy Grow Local's facility from the Coastal Conservation League for the balance of the right-of-way as one of the two new substations that we are going to provide to Dominion. In 2019, we created the Tax Increment Finance District. Eddie, can you give me one move?
There you go. All right.
Tax Increment Finance District at Laurel Island. Many of you will remember this because it was a very big deal. We had to take 193 acres out of the Magnolia TIF. This was a very public process, and put it into a new Laurel Island TIF. We also wanted to add some new parcels, about 58 acres to the TIF, and restart the timing on the TIF to regain the 30 years. County Council and the city both agreed to do so. The school board, unfortunately, was not. They agreed to no increment on the new 58 acres, which you see here highlighted in orange, or maybe that's Texas red or something, but they did not go along with that. And so we also only get the increment on the 193 acres of Laurel Island proper for 19 years, and that goes down a year at a time. The school board accounts, as y'all know, for half of any tax increment on a property. And this compares to, say, a Magnolia TIF, which has 30 years from all three governmental bodies. The Magnolia TIF covers about 1,000 acres, and they get more than the increment they create because it includes all that. Magnolia is only about, I think, 135 acres. There is no increment currently on the Laurel Island TIF that goes to the new development entity. So they're going to have to get in there and front end load it, putting in all the improvements with the hope of being paid back eventually by the TIF. This year we restarted our public outreach early on, probably at the end of December, beginning of January, having virtual meetings with the East Side neighborhood, East Central, North Central, Wagner Terrace, and multiple meetings face-to-face and virtually with the Coastal Conservation League, the Preservation Society of Charleston, and the Historic Charleston Foundation. We've also created a website, and I would recommend that if the Low Line hadn't, which over 1,000 people have accessed in the last 60 days, I believe, and from which a number of comments have been received. This research, along with the previous meetings in 2016, 2017, 2018, and 19, gave us a pretty good handle on what people wanted on and off the island, which were public access to the water with docks or through docks, using docks, piers, walkways, boardwalks, green space, water taxis. They want a lot of green space. Green space will include ballparks, traditional parks, pocket parks, and they were very concerned about losing Singleton Park. So we've worked diligently with Dominion to try and make it eligible for the city to purchase at some point in the future. Singleton Park improvements were very important to them. Pedestrian and bike access on and off the island and to and from the low line. Affordable housing, diverse mixed uses without a focus on retail. On and off site street improvements to protect people, especially children. Flood abatement, protection of tech incubator, opportunity for Dominion to provide more redundancy and reliable service on the eastern side of the peninsula. And as you'll see, we have these limited funds, but we did our best to give our city what the people asked for. I'll now turn it over to Rhett.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor, and other council members for having us here this evening. I'll try to be brief. Sometimes I get a little long-winded because I like talking about engineering, but I know it's not an interest to everyone on the call. But the first thing that we're showing here on the screen, it's kind of interesting when you first look at it. I'll give you a second to try to digest it. But this, in essence, is showing you what the existing soil conditions are on Laurel Island, and what hopefully they will look like once we finish with surcharging and prepping the site for infrastructure. So currently the existing soil conditions have some significant engineering challenges, but they also provide us with a number of opportunities. The existing site that you see out there has a 1-foot cap on top of 11 and 12 feet of municipal solid waste, which is important to know. Robert mentioned it earlier. This is not a dump. This is something that has been controlled, it was measured, and it's something we really have a lot of understanding of how it's going to react over time and how it's going to change as things start to load it and we start to put buildings and infrastructure in place. On top of that, or below the municipal solid waste is dredge spoil, which is really the essence of why the island was first developed. And then ultimately, 75 to 80 feet below that, we have the Cooper Marl, which most people know is where we drive all our pilings for our buildings and deep foundations. So because of the spoil and the municipal solid waste, Laurel Island has some of the highest elevations in all of Charleston. That 1-foot cap that's currently, 1 to 3 foot cap that's currently in place has an elevation of 20 and sometimes a bit higher in the center of the island. that gives us the opportunity to design a drainage system that can handle some of the biggest rainfalls that we design for, and be able to outfall at elevations that are significantly above even where we predict sea level rise will change the elevations of the tide. Being that we are an island, we don't have any impacts to drainage to our neighboring neighbors or streets, or anything that's nearby us. And when we put what we call surcharge on top of the island, it's going to raise our elevations even higher. And so the time it's taken for this island to really get to a point where it's ready for development is giving us a significant look at the engineering associated with the soils and how things will react over time. In the middle of the island, we got a 15-foot pile of dirt that we call surcharge. And that dirt's been sitting there for a number of years. We've been able to measure what that weight does to the municipal solid waste and the dredge spoil and predict how things will settle. So what you're seeing here is what we'll do before we actually start development. We'll preload this island, particularly where all the roads and water and sewer drains are going to be, with a pile of dirt that will then settle the MSW and the dredge spoil, and we'll have a clean corridor where we don't have to worry about contamination. We don't have to worry about messing in with the municipal solid waste below. We'll have 6 feet of material minimum on most every place that we have roads and utilities, and we'll be able to pile support those utilities that are grade dependent and deep. We'll be able to do things like timber cribbing in order to keep drainage pipes from moving around, and we'll be able to design water lines and sewer lines that can work within normal tolerances of settlement. This is very expensive. We're going to have to bring in a lot of dirt over a long period of time and let it sit for a long period of time. And then we have to still do these foundations that are special. We'll have to do special materials for our piping to make sure that any of the settlement over time we can handle. But all this gives us a great opportunity to be resilient. Our utilities will be high, will be dry, and our foundations will be strong to be able to withstand Mother Nature as things change over time. Traffic is another issue that obviously is big on a development of this scale. Laurel Island really has great access to existing roadways. Unfortunately, it's only right now by one street, which is Romney Street. But this image represents the fact that we have great access to the Cooper River Bridge, Meeting Street, I-26 via Romney, Brigade, and Mount Pleasant Street, Morrison Drive, which will lead us to the Port Access Road. And we can see highlighted are the neighborhoods that are around with Wagner Terrace to the west, North Central, on the other side of I-26, East Central being really our neighbor, and the east side being just to the south of us. And the dash line that you see around this exhibit designates the traffic study limits that has been completed. There's been over 30 intersections that have been studied and traffic that's been projected out to 2043, all the way from Cunnington at Meeting Street all the way down to UG Street to the south. So we have to make sure that we get great connectivity to the existing transportation network that's available to us. That's why Romney Street alone really won't suffice to serve the development adequately. We got Brigade Street to the north with a really short little section of road that needs to be extended into the island that will have connections that will allow us to go north up on Meeting Street and allow us to connect in Meeting and I-26. But we needed a connection that had a grade separation over the railroad tracks. Romney Street, as you all know, experiences a number of train movements from the Columbus Street terminal for the BMW trains coming in and out. We also want to make sure we're connected to the BRT. We got close stops are going to be nearby along Meeting Street. We want to make sure we're connected. So one of the big controversial issues is the bridge. And Robert mentioned in 2015, we worked really diligently with the neighborhoods as well as the city of Charleston to look at all the options that were afforded in the existing road network. We looked at elevating the railroad tracks. We looked at every east-west street from Meeting that crosses Meeting Street, Morrison Drive, all the way from Brigade down to Cedar Street to see if there are ways to get in to the island. There are kind of 5 main criteria we had to accomplish. Number one, we had to get up and over Morrison Drive and the railroad tracks and meet the engineering criteria to make sure that it wasn't too steep. Number two, and then we had the vertical clearances over Morrison and the railroad tracks. Number two, we needed to get back to grade at North Hanover so we wouldn't disconnect the existing street network and then have some inadvertent dead-end cul-de-sacs that wouldn't provide for good mobility in the neighborhoods. Three, we had to make sure that we protected the existing housing that was in the area. Romney Street and Conroy Street were looked at really closely, but we're concerned about the impacts it would have to the housing that's there at Meeting Street, where we have residents that park 90 degrees off of Conroy and Romney Street into their apartments and houses that are there. We wanted to make sure we protected the tech incubator, like Robert mentioned earlier, which is between Romney and Conroy, and we needed to have a traffic signal at Meeting Street in order to adequately meter the traffic and to make sure that the intersections operated properly. Only option that fit that criteria was Pueblo Street, option 6, and we had the hurdle of having to secure right away from 995 Morrison, which was done by the county. Unfortunately, we were lucky enough to get that done. So we talk about traffic, we talk about all the impacts to the roads that are around us. The traffic study outlines a number of intersection improvements that are required throughout the grid. That'll include turn lanes, it'll include crosswalks, new signals. We'll be able to provide new streetscaping, drainage improvements, bike path pedestrian connections, the low line presentation before us today. We're very excited about the development of that critical piece of what I consider an infrastructure. It's certainly a park and an amenity to the area. We're working with Alan Davis and Keith Benjamin to make sure that as we develop Pueblo Street, we develop Romney Street, that we have adequate connections that will allow us to take advantage of modal options to lessen our reliance on cars and traffic. And all these improvements are developer required in order to fulfill the development density and the land use that is currently written in the PUD. And then finally, the plan in the PUD, it really focuses on traffic defining density. This plan can only grow at the pace that the access points on Laurel Island allow it to, and the grid around it allow it to. And the traffic study is perfectly clear. It shows that Romney Street, only about 30% of all the development, the density and land use that's written in the PUD could be accessed onto Romney Street. Until after that, we have to look at other access points. We have to expand the Brigade. We have to expand Pueblo Street. Pueblo can handle about another 30% of the development, and Brigade Street can handle about 40%. So the two major things that really kept this project from really developing over the years have really been how to handle the geotechnical and soil conditions, which we think we now understand it after time has allowed us the opportunity to study it and really get a handle on it. And then the in-depth work we've done with the neighborhoods and the traffic studies to figure out how we get people in and out of this development successfully. So I'm gonna turn it over to Eddie, who's gonna talk a bit about the actual plan and the exciting part that everybody really wants to hear about.
All right, well, thanks, Red. And yeah, again, I'm Eddie Bello. I'm an architect here in town with Bello Garris Architects. And so I'm gonna go quickly on this. I know we're last on the agenda. Y'all have had some pretty interesting stuff to talk about. But to quickly go through the plan, one of the first things that we did was develop some guiding principles that will help determine how the island is developed over a long period of time. These were developed based on all the public outreach that we heard. I've only been involved in the last few months, but Rhett and Robert have been involved with this project, this island, for over a decade. So we have a wealth of information, and Robert went through a lot of those. But just real quick, one of the first ones is the connection to the environment. We are on an island. That makes sense that we would want to have as many opportunities for the public to be able to experience the waterfront. Also, as Robert mentioned, we want to have as many public parks and as much open space as we can, ball fields, those types of things. I'll go through that when I show the plan in a minute. Sustainable and resilient practices. Any kind of development in this day and time should have that approach. As you heard from Rhett, it's difficult to build on a former landfill, but our utilities will be very resilient. They'll be certainly more able to to handle climate change and other weather events than the rest of our the utilities elsewhere on the peninsula. And certainly just building here on a former landfill in really the center of our upper part of the city on the peninsula is where development should occur. That in itself is sustainable. We don't want to have more development outside of the city where we're going to induce more sprawl. And so just basically using a landfill site is something that I think most people understand is a very strong positive. Social and economic diversity. There's two things about that. One, we're going to have a significant amount of workforce housing that's required for this project, 20% total, and half of that will be permanent and the other half will be for a period of 10 years. I'll go through that in a minute, but I think the key takeaway there is there's not been any other development that we're aware of, a planned unit development for the city, that is going to provide permanent workforce housing. So we're really proud of that. And the other thing about social and economic diversity is the types of uses we're going to have. As Robert mentioned, there was an earlier plan that was just a big giant shopping district. This will have commercial retail, commercial office, multifamily, entertainment, basically all the things that the peninsula has elsewhere. So this will be a very diverse mix of uses, and ideally it'll have, because of the workforce housing and because of those uses, we'll have a mix of race, income, and age, just like the rest of the peninsula. Quality of the public realm. We have a wonderful public realm here in Charleston. So this plan is designed around the experience of the pedestrian and of the public. The buildings that will be built here will have to be responsive to the public realm, and the plan is again based on that idea. And then the last thing is authenticity. We have a wonderful city. We have the real thing here, and this plan was inspired by how Charleston works. And we have some historic resources on the site that we want to celebrate. So I'll quickly go through the plan. So thinking about how to lay out the island and what the key elements are, up to the northeast here are the Standard Oil ruins that Robert mentioned. And then to the sort of the left here, the west, are the Robert Mills ruins. So we want to make sure the plan responds to those. Just to the northwest, off the picture here is Magnolia Cemetery, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. And then Bridgeview Apartments here. We want to make sure we're very sensitive to those apartments and the cemeteries just all over from to the west of us. And then last, thinking about the views as you approach Charleston from Mount Pleasant. This will be very visible from the bridge. And so we want to make sure that was taken into account as we laid out the island. One of the key first things we wanted to do was really connect it as well as we could to East Central. So we adapted that grid. This main line here, the longest one, that is Romney Street. Romney will be the main street. A lot of focus has been on the bridge, like Rhett has mentioned, but the bridge is really just 2 lanes. People think of it as being this big overpass. It's really just 2 lanes, just like Romney, just like Brigade, just happens to be elevated. So we want to take that grid that's in East Central and then pull it into our street grid. And then as the peninsula, as you go north, and the grid turns into more of a north-south and east-west oriented grid, not unlike how the lower peninsula grew over time. And so what this has done, if you imagine buildings there, this allows us to have views to the water from just about every single street. So that's a key element of the plan. Another thing to take note of is if you look at I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but all of the streets along the water are outboard of the development. So that's just like Murray Boulevard on the Lower Peninsula. One side will have buildings, the other side will always be open to the public for views to the water. So again, that's a big a big issue, a big positive for the plan. And then just quickly to go through, again, one of our key tenets is that connection to the environment. So to that end, we've established a park here at the northeast end. This is right next to the Standard Oil ruins. We have another open area right around where the Robert Mills ruins are. There'll be an interpretive trail there. We have a ferry dock. Again, this is on axis with East Romney Street. This will be a significant dock. Think of just like Waterfront Park. A ferry could eventually have service there. At the lower end of the island, we have another park. This will be a lower scale, more low country feel, because there's really a smaller creek there with crabbing docks. On this northwest side, we have set aside some land for ball fields. I don't know, I'm trying to think, I think the nearest ball field is Wagner Terrace. I mean, I'm sorry, Hampton Park. But anyway, so that's a big positive. Again, that was done to help soften the edge from Bridgeview and from the cemeteries. Singleton Park is not technically part of the PUD, but we are, that's owned by Old Dominion, or by Dominion. I always call it Old Dominion for some reason. It's owned by Dominion. They could put a substation there. What we're doing with the PUD is providing land for Dominion services to be handled on our site, so that hopefully Singleton Park will be turned over to the city and remain a public park. And then last, we have this almost 2-mile path, a pedestrian cycling path all the way around the island. This will be a public amenity. All of these are public. And so this will be something that anyone in the city can go and enjoy throughout the life of the project. All right, so I'll go quick here. We've established some street types. The key takeaway here, I'm not going to bore you with all the different street types, but the main one is this Romney Street, which is a boulevard. And I just want to point out on this, and I'm not going to get too into it, but on all of our major streets, we have a dedicated bike lane. And it's not just a lane, it's actually a protected lane. You can see here, there's a raised planted area. This looks like it's 4 lanes of traffic. It's actually just 2 with parallel parking, just like most of our neighborhood streets. But the point that I want to make here about the cycling lane is that this promotes cycling not just as a recreational activity, but it's really as a true mode of transportation to get to and from work or shopping or whatever. And again, these are showing how cycling and pedestrian routes are on the island. Very quickly, we've identified where the height districts would be. So the light blue or the bluish color, those are the lowest. That's 2.5 to 3.5 stories. I left out, I always forget to talk about this entertainment district we've set aside. That's only 2 stories. So again, the lower heights are basically on the external part of the island. And then the higher heights, the red is 12 stories and the purple is 8, are clustered in the center. And one thing, we just made a presentation to the Planning Commission last week. This site is currently zoned heavy industrial, which means any kind of use can go out there and you don't have to do any kind of plan. You can just start building. And the height district is the tallest in the entire city. It's this very unusual height district. It's a W height district. And it's really, the zoning is set up for this property to be developed just like the State Ports Authority's properties just to the south. So it's set up to have those giant cranes. So what we're basically doing is we're lowering all the heights and then we're putting the heights, the taller heights in the areas where they'll have the least impact from external areas. This is just a super quick view looking back southeast. And what it's just showing here is how we've set aside most of the open, a good portion of the open land, again, facing Bridgeview and facing the cemeteries. And you can also see the heights are very comparable to what's been built just up and down Morrison Drive. All right, so open space is a big issue and a very strong element of this plan. You can see here all of that green is dedicated public open space. And this chart on the left basically shows, for a PUD, the minimum city requirement for total open space is 20%. Our plan is providing 36%, which instead of 39 acres is the minimum, we're providing 70 acres. But the real important aspect here is the actual usable open space. This is what would be parks, the ball fields, just all of the areas that you can actually access. And the city minimum would be 9.8 acres. We're providing almost 40 acres. So we're at 4 times what the city would require. So that's a strong component. We pushed all the Heights Center, put all the public park areas where we think they'd have the most impact, which is outside on the water views. All right, I'm about to wrap up. I know y'all are probably very worn out now. One next step we're going to have are the developing the architectural principles. This will identify and guide how buildings will be designed, as well as landscape, signage, those types of things. And that is something that we've got to develop. That will be an entirely public process, and then it will be reviewed and approved in a public forum at the BAR large. And then because this development is going to have different issues and different design elements to consider, we're going to have a separate Laurel Island Board of Architectural Review set up. And it is very similar to our BAR already. It'll have 5 members. The meetings will be entirely public, and they'll be advertised just like the BAR, and the members will be comprised of people with similar backgrounds to the city's BAR. All right, I mentioned that we went to the Planning Commission last week, and we had, it was a very good meeting. As you can imagine, there was a lot of public comment, but really in all of the public comment, all the meetings that we've had, there haven't been any major issues with the plan itself. There's been some nuances with some of the language, but overall we've been very happy with the comments we've received, and I think that's because we've met with so many people. And so I won't read all of these, but the first one that the city recommended is just setting some benchmarks for how the workforce housing would be incorporated over a certain period. And again, to stress one more time, we're going to have half of it will be permanent. The second one is just laying out some requirements to make sure that it's truly going to be a mixed use development, that we don't just build a lot of housing out there. So that's just a requirement by the city, which makes sense. They wanted us to basically guarantee the open space that's usable. And then the last, there was a concern that there may be some gates. That was never the intention, but we wanted to make sure that was clarified. So this will always be a public space, basically an extension of the city. All right, so very quickly, the community benefits of the plan. Again, we're taking a former landfill, heavy industrial site, and basically having a new community extension of our community just across the railroad tracks. There will be significant street and drainage improvements. We can't do any of this stuff unless we improve the streets. And that, again, like Robert said, it makes it safe for the kids in that part of the neighborhood. And certainly just, we want it to be very easy for the public to access. I've said this a lot of times, the public open space is extensive for this island. It's a key component of the plan. There's ball fields, trails, parks. We have 2 docks, significant. And like I said, it's 4 times what the minimum would be. So it's a lot. And then last, we have a diverse mix of uses. This is not a giant shopping district. I remember many years ago, there's an idea to have a golf course out there. This is just basically an extension of the peninsula. And again, workforce housing is a significant component of the project. All right, so I went through that as quickly as I could, but that's the plan, and I think we're ready for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We can go right to the questions. Anyone have the questions? Anyone have questions?
Chairman,
Oh,
a question.
Councilman Sacrum, I can see you now.
Thank you, Chairman. Not really a question, just a comment. I was at Wagner Terrace's Neighborhood Association meeting 2 weeks ago, and the project came up, and they did indicate that you all had done a good job of sharing information as you could, but there was some concern about the PUD and the flexibility of the PUD in terms of, they were worried that, once the PUD gets approved, or if it does get approved, if it is approved, what changes could be made after the fact. And they did also mention to me, as several folks, Wagner Terrace Association members did mention that they did want to see more engagement, given the fact we're in COVID, and they felt like you've all have attempted it, but many were not satisfied. So I'm just sharing what I've heard from some of the members in the community.
Well, I'll speak very quickly, and I think Mr. Hellman will want to talk about some of the language. I live in Wagner Terrace, and I've lived there for 27 years. And I appreciate that. I think, we've heard some, again, I made a quick speech to the Planning Commission last week. We have met with everyone we could. And I appreciate, everyone wants more public engagement, and I don't ever disagree with that. But the one thing what I mentioned to the Planning Commission last week was, we haven't heard any negative comments. We haven't heard, hey, put parks here instead. We haven't heard your heights should be over there. We just heard meet with more people, and I think that's fine. But we don't want to just extend something to extend it. So I want to put that out there. Definitely, we met with Wagner Terrace. There weren't many comments. Most people have questions about the street improvements down the road and how traffic might be handled. I mean, certainly this is several blocks from connecting to Wagner Terrace. But I just wanted to touch on that. We've done the best we could. It met with everybody we can. But I'll let Brian talk a little bit about the language of the PUD and what could change.
PUD.
Brian, you're muted.
Can you not hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So as it relates to the PUD, in terms of what could change, that's an interesting question to answer, because the way we've drafted the PUD is so that there's a lot of flexibility in some parts and very little flexibility in others. So there was an earlier slide that Eddie showed that identified a mixed use area. And that mixed use area is an area in which all the uses that are allowed in the PUD can exist. And those uses are residential, office, commercial, retail, accommodations. And there's a varying number of those. The way the PUD works, as Red had mentioned, traffic defines density, and the density is affected by what our traffic allows. So as the new connections are built, whether it's the improvements to Romney or Brigade or to Coolblow, it will allow more density. But to get to that, you've got to build the roads, and that is all baked in. So where we have flexibility is in where we can locate the uses in the PUD. Where we don't have flexibility is in the park space. That's mandated. We don't have flexibility in reducing our workforce housing. That's mandated, and of course 10% and permanently, not a burn off like you would see typically in the MU or Upper Peninsula districts. And then where we have that flexibility, again, goes back to uses, where we can locate them, whether we build something to the height districts are fixed, but we don't have to build an 8-story building or a 12-story building. We can build whatever height up to that. Those are maximums, not minimums. So flexibility in some areas, no flexibility in, I think, the areas that have been most important, and that's improvements to the streets to get the density, the park space around the perimeter.
And I want to make a comment on this this particular project. There's another one of the, another project in the district I represent anyway, but what it is, this project was going on a long time, and I was having meetings with them all the time, almost over a year, past a year. I had them to visit with the neighborhood association, which is East Central, which is most of the impact will be happening, which is East Central. I had them also to go to the east side, also to North Central, and to Wagner Terrace, because the area, just the area, let them know what's being compromised in this particular plan. But the plan is really going to impact mostly East Central, which is Cool Blow, Cedar Street, and those particular areas. That's where the plan is going. And if you look at the map, you will see where Wagner Terrace is located from this project. It's way over the other side, you know, but I just wanted them to be aware of what's happening in the Laurel Island project. So I spoke with them and I said, well, I need you all to go to all these different entities, which they did. But they were meeting with these various neighborhood associations, not yesterday, almost 2 years now, having meetings with East Central, having meetings with the various neighborhood associations before, all the time. So this just didn't happen yesterday. So if a person said, they wasn't aware of this, I don't know what's happening, I don't understand it, because I know of it, and I asked them to do thus and so with these particular project that's coming, because this is going to want to be one of the major, largest project that the city have ever seen. And this is why I had them to go to these various entities to explain to them, since they are neighborly, abutting these areas, so they can actually know what's happening in with this particular project. This project is going to be a long time, John. I probably won't be around when this project is finished, completed, even halfway completed, you know. So we just want to make sure that wherever the best we can get out of this deal now is going to be, and even with the affordable housing piece, this is going to be grand for the affordable housing piece that we never had before. We're going to have so many units there that's going to be there for perpetuity under this particular project. So I just wanted to explain that to everyone, that I was meeting with them all the time, always meeting with them, and something happened in the area that I represent, and had them to go out to these other entities just to inform them that was what happened. And even the planning commission came behind me and did the same thing and said, go back to these entities just to explain what's happening in these particular areas. So that's why they went back out and the planning commission approved it.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes,
as your vice chairman,
yes,
can I ask a procedural question? Are we going to be asked to vote on any?
Yes, we have to vote on this.
What will be the nature of our vote? Are we being asked to make recommendations to the full council about the community benefit features, especially the workforce housing and the impact on the surrounding neighborhoods? Or are we going to be asked to recommend the entire PUD proposal? I think knowing the hour and knowing that a lot of the questions that we probably have on this committee are going to be shared by the full council, I guess I would suggest that maybe as the community development committee, that we focus on the things that the full council relies on our evaluation and analysis and, and targeted study to the community development features of the PUD proposal. I look forward. I've sat in several sessions now, and I would really like to talk a little more thoroughly, for example, about the features and the amenities that I've heard the community members speak to, and I understand from the two Cool Blow related meetings that I wasn't able to attend. The Singleton Park and the improvements to Cool Blow as a pedestrian accessible, multimodal street were really some of the things that were discussed at great length among the community. So I feel responsible as a community development committee member to make sure that we're all understanding that some of the things that are being featured in the plan are really not under the full control of the development group. And I just wrote down, I think I heard this for the first time that I actually heard it, that Mr. Revere said that cool blow improvements are developer required in order to handle the access to the density that you all plan on building out that requires that street. So that was good news that, you know, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of needing to improve cool blow, obviously for the bridge, but also the accessibility and the safety of that street for the neighborhood. So that's just an example. I don't know anything about the future of Singleton Park, but I do understand that that's really important to the community. And I do want to sort of, you know, make sure that we're all understanding and in agreement of the workforce housing elements to the PUD. So I'm sorry to, you know, ramble on, but I do feel like those are sort of the focuses for our committee.
I'm gonna explain the Singleton Park to you, and I'll let and I'm gonna call Councilman Sacrament. I saw his hands up, and I'll go over the next person. The Singleton Park came about years ago when I was on council. It was a young boy died because he was playing in this building that was vacant. Was a tire company around the corner of Meeting and Cedar Street. And the big tire fell on him and he died because he didn't have any place to play. So SC&G had owned the property where the Singleton Park is, which they still do, Dominion owns it now. And the city went to them and asked them, could they use the area for a park? SC&G told the city no. It was a gentleman that was on the board of directors at the United Way where I was employed. And I went and spoke with him, Mr. Cal McMeekin. And I said, Mr. McMeekin, I need a park. I need a park for these young kids to play so they can have some place to go. I said, please help me with this. He went to Columbia with SC&G because he was a big person in SC&G. And he went to them and explained my situation to them. And they came back and said, okay, I'll let y'all use the park. And that's how this park came forth. And so we had the young gentleman, we had the family members there, and we named the park after the young boy who died. That's how the park came about. But we still do not own the park, but what they're trying to do now is get possession of that area so that the park will be a community park and they will have the park for duration. And that's how that park became about. So that's one entity. But I'm gonna let Councilman Saccharin first. I saw his hand first, then I'll go to Councilman Gregory, then I'll go back and you're gonna be able to ask questions and just kind of finalize this. We have to vote on this and send it to the full council because the planning commission already approved it. So come to council, come to community development before you go to full council.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification. I'm supportive of Laurel Island. I was just reiterating what some of the constituents I spoke with. Many of them said they're aware of the project. I think that their concerns, and maybe this is just a request of the developers, is if you could somehow put together a list of things that are non-negotiable, that aren't going to change for folks. I think that's their concern is, and I've heard this, you know, verbatim, you know, the number of affordable housing units will change. The number of parks that they're going to provide will change. So I just want to make sure that if we can get something out to constituents, it's not just Wagner Terrace, but North Central, Hampton Park Terrace, and I do have to take issue, Chairman. You know, this is a project that's a large project that's going to be on the peninsula, certainly in your neck of the woods, but in terms of scope and size and traffic, this is going to affect the entire peninsula. So I just want to make sure that constituents all over the peninsula understand the impact and what is going to be baked in with the PUD and what are some things that will potentially change. So those are my comments. Just wanted to clarify.
I understand what you're saying, council member, but if it wasn't involved in it in years that I was involved in it and had them to go out to these neighborhood associations before, then I would have said yes. But these various neighborhood associations was informed years ago before you got on council about this plan, what was going to be entailed in the plan. And then you have new people moving in, so they want to find out some differently things. But this was already done a couple of years ago. So that's why I was saying what I said.
I got it.
In essence, that's it. So we can do that also. That'll be something that is to be informed, because I want them to be informed, the other communities to be informed what's happening, because it's going to be a big project, very large project. And so that's why they were sent to these neighborhood associations to make sure that they understand what was coming forth. I think I see Councilman Gregory hand, I believe.
Yeah, you did. And, you know, I would agree with you. This has been going on for years. And I do think that you said something key there are a lot of new people coming to the neighborhood who may not have been exposed. And that's going to happen forever, guys. I only got one email from a Wagner terrorist person, one email. And that had to do with the total number of units that were being built. But I think that sometimes we go beyond I'm trying to find the right word. I think that we could be going through this if every time someone has an issue, we sort of go back to the drawing board. I think as a concept, it's very clear. What we're talking about really is a new town in town, an area that basically, to me, will be pretty much self-contained. Work, live, play, everything can be done there. So I am going to support it in its totality to be the concept to be recommended to council. My question though is, can we put a price tag, when I say not a price tag, can we put a cost on permanent affordability? Can we put a value on that? Can anybody put a value on that?
No.
Councilmember Gregory, this is Gianna. We're working on that now.
Okay.
We're basically looking at what it costs for an average unit in a multifamily development, just based on what Don Cameron's doing and some of the other partners. The mayor asked a similar question a few weeks ago. And so we're looking at how we do that proficiently, because we certainly assess costs currently and literally attempt to multiply that cost out over X number of years. Again, because this is perpetuity, then that says to the formula, there's no end to those years. So again, we can give an estimate, and I have team members looking at that currently to come up with what that would mean.
I mean, and the last thing is, you know, I do think that this is something, guys, everybody says that they're not going to live to see this. I'm going to live to see this, okay?
Good for you.
I'm going to be here to see
Good
this.
for you.
I'm not doing those self-fulfilling prophecies, guys. I will be here.
And as a point of clarification for Councilmember Jackson, the process on the finishing touches of Cool Blow are handled separately. The approval of that is handled totally separately from this. And we have never had a plan to change the width of Cool Blow, particularly in front of one Cool Blow. And it actually, because we get we hope to get the old substation at the corner of Cool Blow and Meeting Street, that we can actually widen where Meeting Street. But that's going to be a city process, a public process, and sometime in the future. I think Christopher Morgan made it real clear before the Planning Commission that that was not really what we were talking about that night. We also did agree to certain stipulations that the Planning Commission came up with, which were some of the things I think that Councilmember Saccharin was talking about. We'd be glad to get you a list. I mean, that's not an issue. We'll get that, Councilmember Saccharin, and send it to you. But this has an awful lot of control in it, and that begins with the height. That begins with, for the first time ever, we're using traffic generated as a limitation of density. I can't tell you how many traffic studies I've paid for in my life as a developer that just went in a file somewhere. We're actually going to use the traffic study, but the traffic study also is ongoing. You know, in other words, as we get ready to build something, we got to do another traffic study to prove that we have not let any street drop below, right, Brett,
Acceptable level.
acceptable level of service. So that too is ongoing. I mean, it's not like these things don't come back up for discussion because DOT is going to force you to do it. But we don't want to blow up our traffic because then who would want to live there is the simple answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Clement. And I'm just trying to sort of manage expectations, especially as, you know, this committee for the council deals with public interest that far extends or exceeds, you know, what often we can provide with the city's actual resources. So I just I don't want it all to be identified in the mind of the citizens, especially those people who have come out to the community meetings, that this is a whole package that they're going to see overnight. So maybe a good example of that is I understand that we have, I don't even know if it's an actual option to buy the property that's now known as Singleton Park. And if we do, is that going to be part of the TIF incremental funds that have to be collected? Or how are we actually going to manage? I think I heard the number $2 million purchase for the land where we would want to put a public park.
What we were doing was creating an opportunity that Dominion would be willing to sell. And in order to even have the conversation, Dominion said, well, you got to get us our new substations. And that's fell on us to go do. And that's the reason we put the coastal conservation into a local site under contract. And then we'll donate another site on the island itself. So we're going to offer Dominion a solution, and therefore we hope, as was expressed in the past, that they'll be willing to act with the city. We're not in the middle of the negotiations between Dominion and the city, and I don't think that could have possibly even started yet, because we don't have our development agreement with Old Dominion. Mayor, you may have some input on that.
Well, Singleton Park is a park that the city really has wanted to have permanent control of I remember ever since I worked for in the 90s, and it belongs to Dominion. And so I think Robert described it well that, you know, when I was looking for a substitute property for someone else, I asked Dominion about that little worn out substation they have a block away from Meeting Street. And I had a conversation with Danny Kansas, and he said, well, Mayor, if we moved off of here, we got to put the substation somewhere else. And the only other property we have is Singleton Park that y'all rent from us, or that we give you for $1 a year or whatever it is. So that led to this whole discussion of trying to find some other sites where they could locate their infrastructure so that we'd have the opportunity to buy the property one day. I think it's, you know, there are not enough parks around there, and it would be a real, it'd be a real shame if that one went away. I'll say that.
I appreciate all of that. I'm just, you know, listening into what the community is thinking about, and I do feel like it's incumbent on all of us, and especially the council, to manage those expectations, because we don't want to, you know, we don't want to be approving something that we know is going to have other phases of opportunities and improvements that we're not going to be, you know, saying yes to day one. So that's just another example. While I have the floor, I just want to have one more question and answer about what is in red, which is the workforce housing percentage. And I know Councilmember Mitchell, so sorry, you've done an amazing job of keeping your own, you know, communities involved and informed about all of this. But I do think one example of something that has come forward in just the last few months, or maybe even less than that, is the addition. There's been the 10% of permanently affordable workforce housing as a contribution by the overall development system of units. But now there's an additional 10% of units that will be priced in that same category of rental workforce housing. And they have a time limit of 10 years under the proposal that's in front of us. And I know the Planning Commission had a really good quality discussion about how those 10-year units would be delivered. And that is one of the, I called it an enhanced conditions that you all,
Yeah,
the
no
Planning
problem,
Commission
man. I
agreed
want to get
to.
out there and meet and see.
That, basically, instead of
Excuse me, Councilmember. Councilmember Waring, could you put your phone on mute because we can hear you talking. I'm sorry about that, Councilwoman.
No problem. So I'm almost done. So basically what I understand, and Christopher Morgan affirmed this to me today, was that at the end of the Planning Commission, we are happy to accept the 20% as the guaranteed amount of workforce units split into the two components. 10% will be permanent, 10% will be for 10 years, and the 10-year clock will essentially ride on every unit as it receives its certificate of occupancy. So instead of having the clock start at the signing of the PUD, which concerned all of us, it'll be unit by unit when they get their CO. We'll have a 10-year time frame. So I did want to make that very clear because I don't think it has been clear, in some of the iterations over the last few months or weeks.
Councilmember Mitchell and other council members and mayor, in the past, CD committee has approved, in particular, the affordable housing and other aspects of the plan as it has been presented, and you all are comfortable with that, understanding that other facets of the plan may be developed, and because of the magnitude of this will likely be represented as those things come along and as they're developed and finalized. But the clerk's office wanted me to clarify the fact that there is typically an endorsement, a vote by CD committee of City Council of their approval of what has been presented to date. So I just wanted to bring that clarity. And thank you, Councilwoman Jackson, for bringing the matter up relative to when the clock started in relation to the 10-year affordability period. That was one other item that was changed from the original plan at the Planning Commission meeting. So thank you all.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Mr.
We call for the question first.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Appel has had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Councilman Appel.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I'm not going to hold us up too much longer. I just want to briefly say a couple things. Number one, from someone with a zoning and land use background, I mean, this is a dream, of urban planning. This is what smart, good development looks like. It's infill, it's mixed use, it's affordable housing. It hits all the, it checks all the boxes. And what I would also say to the questions about those concerned about, specificity in terms of land use and things like that, zoning by its very nature has flexibility built into it. I mean, think about how many parcels we have in the city of Charleston today that are zone GB, right? General business. I mean, the list of what can go into GB is a mile long. So there's always going to be some flexibility and some leeway in zoning ordinances. It's inherent in the process. So what I think is important to fixate on is what we've heard from tonight about what's not negotiable. What is fixed. It's the affordable housing. It's the open space park elements. It's the tying development to traffic and transportation infrastructure, which we don't do elsewhere. That'll be a major improvement for this development. So just long story short, I mean, I can't be in favor of this more. And I think the development team has done an excellent job shepherding this through the process. And frankly, if these guys haven't done enough public outreach, I don't know how much public outreach we're expecting of people. So I'm going to vote in favor of this tonight.
Any more questions before we, Councilman Waring? Maybe a call for the question.
Again, I just got a couple of questions, I guess. I see it has its own BAR. In the event that, 10 years down the road, you get in a dispute with a zoning issue, a developer building something on the island and the BAR, and it ends up in litigation. Is this a situation where the city can still intervene in, as we did with the Sergeant Jasper type situation?
Brian, can you answer that, please?
I can. Councilmember Waring, that's a great question. And just the way the LIBAR, as it's called, Laurel Island Board of Architectural Review, will work. It's a 5-person body, 2 people appointed by the city, 3 people appointed by the Laurel Island Community Association. And it's going to be a public meeting that the city's going to notice. So the public will be able to attend it just like they can attend a regular BAR or BZA or what have you meetings. If there's an appeal from that LIBAR, it's then heard by the City of Charleston's BAR large. Okay, so then it goes to the BAR that we all know, and it acts as an appellate body, just like it would be an appellate body if when Dennis Dowd was the city's architect and he made a staff decision, or even when Mr. Bello was the city's architect and he made a staff decision, and those decisions are appealed to the BAR, the LIBAR decision would be appealed much the same way to the city's BAR large.
Okay,
that
great.
could then get appealed to circuit court, and everything would be the same as it already is. So you could almost look at this as like a staff decision if you follow the normal path of how the city's process is.
I follow completely. You've answered this question. Thank you, Mr. Hillman. Now, when this PUD should this PUD be amended again 10 years down the line, does it come back in front of the city's planning commission? Does that amendment come back in front of council?
Brian, can you answer that, please?
Right. So the amendment process, the city's ordinance speaks to 2 types of amendments: a minor amendment that would go only to the city's planning department. I don't think really anything in our PUD would meet the minor amendment requirements. Right. And we had some language that did, but we're going to take that out. So really any amendment of consequence would go through the same PUD amendment process, which is the same process you have to do to get a PUD anyway. It's planning commission, council, committees, the whole drill all over again.
That's clear enough. Thank you, Mr. Hillman.
Thank you, Councilmember Waring.
All right.
Any other questions? If you don't have any other questions, I can call for the question.
Yeah, because I really
Call
think
for the questions.
that answers Councilwoman Jackson's issue, I think. Thanks for that answer, Brian.
Okay, all in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Opposers? The ayes have it. Thank you very much, Mr. Clements and his staff. Do we have anything else? Mr. Mayor, you have anything else to say or anything else to bring before the body?
Well, we got some extra time here, maybe another half hour.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Oh, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And your advice. And Councilmember Sacklin will get with you about the list you want.
Thank you.
I'm going to do the roll.
Thank all of you.
We all want it, please. We all would like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councilman Woman Jackson would like to list. We all would get a copy of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we don't have any other things to bring before the body, we can stand for adjournment.
See y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Everybody, thank you.